All right, welcome back, Raider Nation. It is time for Silver and Black today, the post-game edition. Not a happy post-game if you're a member of Raider Nation. The Raiders lose 24-19 in Los Angeles to the Chargers in a game that was full of some real bright spots and some not so bright spots, but we'll go through all of that here in a second. If you haven't subscribed to the show, please do me a favor and do that if you would. If you're listening to us on the audio side, on the Odyssey Podcast Network, go ahead and check us out there. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. On YouTube, just hit the notification button along with the subscribe button, and you'll be informed anytime we go live. Now, joining me for the post-game show to talk all about it, get the instant reaction, of course, our normal post-game voice of the fan, and that, of course, is Murf from Raiders Fan Radio. And also joining us tonight is our good friend, and show is familiar. Obviously, he's been on the show a bunch. That is Evan Groat of Just Pod Baby as well. So he is back. Guys, not the way Raider Nation wanted to start the McDaniels era, but saw some real bright stuff out there, some concerns as well. But let's, as we always do, Murph, we're going to go to you for your instant reaction. We're going to start with the positives. What did we see? What did we like? What encouraged you, even in this tough loss down in Los Angeles?
Well, Scott, since I am the voice of the fan and Raider fan equals rational thinking, I will offer up this for you. Yeah, the football is dumb. It's a baby's game and our season's over. I mean, you know, it's tough not to be discouraged by the way this thing went down, but I will say this. There were a ton of mistakes tonight. We saw pre-snap penalties going on, which we hadn't seen all preseason. We saw Derek turn the ball over 3 times, which we hadn't seen happen all preseason. We got gashed defensively a bunch of times. So despite all of that, it was a 5-point game. So on the road, and which I know is a home game for us, and shout out and much respect to Raider Nation that showed up in full force at SoFi. And, you know, the Raider Nation always holds it down so amazingly in Southern California. So much respect to all of you. But anyways, so despite all that, we came away with a 5-point loss. I mean, it's hard not to be discouraged, but I think Raider Nation, if we just got to remember, it's early in the year, like it's one game. It's really, the season isn't over yet. I know it's a division rival and all the stuff that went along with it. And it just makes all the detractors of the Raiders and all the people that overhype the Chargers every offseason, it just makes them right. But keep the faith, man. This thing ain't over yet. We got a long way to go.
I love how even in defeat against the Chargers, you get in those are so, and you do them so well, Murph. It's perfect. I know Raider Nation appreciates it. Evan, now I know you said on Twitter right before the show that you want Josh McDaniels fired, you want Dave Ziegler fired. I'm just kidding. But Evan, you know, you look at this game, and I picked the Raiders to win the game. Actually, I thought they would go down there. But let's start with the positives. I mean, Nate Hobbs, some of that defensive backfield at times, there was some times where they were out of sync. But overall, I thought they played really well. Nate Hobbs did play well. Yes, they held the Chargers to 24 points. And, of course, there was a big first half there and the one score in the second half. But overall, I think they did pretty well. The rest of the defense we'll talk about in a moment. But what did you see overall that gave you encouragement for this season and for this Raiders team?
Well, you mentioned Nate Hobbs. He obviously was a standout in this game, showing up not only in coverage, but also showing up in run support. You got to love seeing that. Your cornerbacks willing to come up and get physical at the line of scrimmage, making tackles. But, you know, the other obvious one has to be Davante Adams. I mean, as good as advertised, the connection is clearly there with him and Derek Carr. 10 receptions, 141 yards, and a touchdown. So that was like the big positive takeaway for me was Davante Adams. I hope to see that continue. I got him on my fantasy team, so I have no problem with him getting 17 targets, but I would like to see, you know, Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller get more involved. But for today, it was the Davante Adams show. And again, as good as advertised, that connection looks real good right now, early on in the season.
Right, and I'm looking to the side here if you're watching YouTube live or if you're with us on Twitch or Twitter live as well. And just looking at the stats, Davante Adams, 17 targets, as you mentioned, 10 receptions, 141 yards. Murph, Davante Adams is everything and more that Raider Nation thought he would be, isn't he?
Yeah, he's pretty incredible. And you know, it was definitely exciting to watch. It was exciting to see the connection between him and Derek. Not to be negative Nancy here, but just to let's throw it out there though too. Didn't we? Well, I'll say didn't we? I'm not gonna assume for everybody else. I felt Derek was forcing the ball a little bit there though too. It felt like there were some looks, especially that one deep into the end zone, like, and he kind of underthrew him anyways. Like Derek was just, look, I'm not going to pile on Derek Carr. I think it was clear he'd want this game back. No one wants this game back more than Derek Carr, Raider Nation. So I think let's avoid piling on the guy. I think we have a good quarterback. But as far as that connection that goes with Davante Adams, it felt like he was pushing it a little bit too much because he wanted to show off that connection, which is kind of understandable, I guess. But Davante's the real deal, man. I'm trying to remember there was one play where he made a nice run after the catch where he kind of darted inside and avoided a tackle and spun away from another one and and like you see those kinds of moves and that kind of athleticism and electricity on the field, like it's going to be awesome. I mean, you look at numbers wise, I mean, dude had a freaking baller day, right? So a lot to be look forward to there.
Yeah, another bright spot, Evan, I think, too, was even though they went away from him for a while, was Josh Jacobs, 10 rushes, 57 yards, including a long of 18. And then you look at him in the passing game, he had a nice 16-yard reception as well. Josh Jacobs looked good when he had the opportunity. Clearly, the Raiders, part of their game plan, Mo and I talked about it on Thursday on the show, was, listen, you got to run that, you got to establish that run so that you can open it up a little bit, especially with that Chargers defensive front and how they've gotten better. So you look at that and you look at Josh Jacobs, did well. They just didn't get to use him as much, I think, because they had to go, obviously, especially towards the end of the game, although he had some nice runs there too, they had to go to the pass and try to catch up because they were playing catch up. But what'd you think of Josh Jacobs tonight?
First of all, Scott, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I think I lost her. You can hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I was having some audio issues there. I was trying to fiddle around with it. Yeah, I agree. I think they only had like 15 to 17 carries total in the game. Josh Jacobs had 13 of those carries I have it right here. 13 carries total as a team for 64 yards. So did not get it done on the run game. I was texting you throughout the first half of this game that the run game was non-existent, and I was a bit surprised to see that, actually, because we know how poor the Chargers' run defenses was a year ago, near the bottom of the league. And I know that Josh McDaniel's establishing the run game is a big part of what he wants to do on offense. So yeah, I definitely think that's an area where they're going to have to improve here in the future, is get that run game more involved. We didn't see anything from Zamir White as well. So I'd like to see him get involved a little bit more here in the future. But yeah, the run game was a major disappointment for me.
Murf, you look at this game too. Darren Waller, took a while for them to get him involved, i.e. the connection between Carr and Adams early, but then he does. He gets 79 yards. Looks like he just played last week. He is back and he's got his contract. Everything is good, and he looked everything like we expected him to be too. He's so important to this offense, even with Davante Adams. It would have been great, I thought, if they could have somehow got him earlier involved in the game, but it's encouraging to see him go out there and ball out like we know he can.
Yeah, much like Evan was just talking about with the performance that Josh Jacobs had today, which I agree. I thought it was awesome, and I was surprised they didn't stick with that more. Like they were moving the ball with Jacobs, and then all of a sudden we run like a double reverse flea flicker Derek Carr lead block thing. I'm like, what is that? Like, but anyways. The point being, though, is that it took for the second half, it felt like, for them to kind of come around and start spreading the ball around. And Waller was such a huge part of that. And he was electric, man. It was the Darren Waller that we've all come to expect. And I would say this to Raider Nation out there, those of you that were kind of hating on Waller at the end of last year, he was hurt, man. And so give the guy a break. And clearly when he's healthy, he's one of the most dynamic, if not the best tight end in all of football. He certainly got paid like he is one. And so let's, I hope that you were, if you were critical of him and the ones that were out there going he's going to be traded. No, he's not. He's a huge part of this offense, and he's going to freaking light it up out there. And it's just a matter of, I'm hoping that the lack of targets for the other guys that weren't named Davante Adams, I'm hoping that that's just a settle down period. I mean, it's unfortunate we had to settle down against the Chargers, but hopefully, I mean, we're going to go up against the Cardinals next week, who got absolutely throttled today. So hopefully we get business back on track next week.
I think there's one thing we need to keep in mind here, if you don't mind me interrupting here for a second. The Chargers are a really good team. Yes, the Raiders didn't play a clean football game, and that has been a major emphasis that we've heard from Josh McDaniels coming out of training camp is, they want to play clean football, limit the turnovers, limit the penalties. And, we did not see that happen today. Murf said it was a 5-point game despite the turnovers. So, and they were playing against a darn good team, the Chargers. So yes, disappointing outcome, but still a lot to take away, on the positive note for this game.
No question about that. And I think that's the one thing. And I know I'm watching the chat on YouTube, and of course everybody wants to talk about, except for the spam that I'm also getting. The
Nothing like getting bots in your chat, man.
Oh yeah, I know. You gotta love that. But everybody wants to talk about the bad things that happen, the negative things that happen. We'll get to some of those, obviously, where there's needs for improvement on this team through one game. But again, remember one game. I'm seeing so many people get emotional, and hey, you're a fan, so I get it. But getting emotional and thinking that this is going to be a terrible year and saying all kinds of crazy stuff, I don't think is fair. I mean, especially around the Derek Carr thing. Listen, the offensive line, here's my concern, Murf, and I want to get your point of view on this. They started rotating. I think they rotated 6 or 8 times that I counted at the right tackle, right guard, between Illuminor, between Parham, the rookie. Cotton was out there. So you see that's not a good look in your first game. And not only that, but it didn't hold up. Colton Miller, I saw comments about that. Colton Miller, they're saying, oh, he had a crappy game. You know what? He had a tough game. There's no question. He's a very, very good left tackle, but he was playing against a very, very good defensive front. Joey Bosa, this Charger team, like Evan said, is no slouch. I'm not saying they're a Super Bowl champion or like anything like that, but you also have to remember when you're playing against a guy who's good, sometimes you don't get the best out of yourself. And so that can happen too. So you had a little bit of a perfect storm there. But what did you think? That offensive line, everybody was worried about it, and they didn't exactly put our worries to bed.
No, it was, there's certainly, there's a concern there, man. And I think it was Miller that got beat on the sack at the end of the game. And speaking of that too, Khalil Mack's still a closer. That's when we lost him, and I understand why John Gruden chose to trade him. I get it, with the amount of money that the Bears paid him and the amount of compensation they got in return. Didn't do much with that compensation, but that's neither here nor there. But in terms of the deal, it made sense. But man, that hurt because he was our closer. He was the guy to get the sack on third down, just like we saw tonight. He's the guy that picked off Cam Newton and ran into the end zone to seal a Raiders victory. And so we saw that closer show up. It's unfortunate we didn't see Chandler Jones show up as a closer today, which when we get to the negatives of the thing, that's one of the things I want to talk about. But anyways, you asked about the offensive line. I think it's concerning because we all knew it was going to be concerning. But even that said, and I'm not trying to put lipstick on the pig here, but Derek threw 3 picks with a clean pocket. And I'm not trying to put on Derek either, but what I am saying is this, Raider Nation, I know it was 6 sacks. I know that's a lot of I know that it was the offensive line was clearly beat and dominated in this game. But we also, considering all of that, we were still in it. So right. If we're a tweak or a coaching point or a free agent acquisition away from shoring this thing up even a little bit, and we're playing against one of the best teams in the conference, according to everyone, you know what I mean? I can't believe that it's that we're not close. I feel despite all the crap, I feel like we're close, and even that offensive line, I feel like we're close. It's Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. You're talking about 2 potential Hall of Famers here lining up on the corners. It's not like we were going up against me and Evan. You know what I mean? You're talking about 2 absolute studs out there. So, let's not totally freak out and overreact.
No, and I agree. And you brought up a point there, too, about the clean pockets on the interceptions. And that's what I was making the point earlier. I was getting a lot of folks on Twitter saying because he hasn't practiced or hasn't been in a preseason game, because he hasn't been in the system. Yes, there's definitely some lack of comfort there. I could see it. Evan, I know we talked about before we went on the air. Are you seeing it as well with Derek in that pocket? And that's totally fine. You expect that. In fact, both sides of the ball, you expect some uh-ohs because it's the first time in game action, real game action, that they're experiencing. So you can forgive that and you look past that. Some of that on the offensive line as well. But to your point about the long ball to Adams, again, just to say it was underthrown. It's not a big deal. You just move past it and you figure that out. Where there is issues with familiarity with the system, that's fine. But when it comes to that other side of the performance, it's no big deal. Evan, that offensive line for you, I don't think it's good. Look, you have rotation sometimes depending on what's going on with personnel. But to have that many rotations in one game and to see that right side get beat quite a bit, and then to add today the left side not doing as well as it usually does, that certainly spelled some disaster, especially for that Raiders running game.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as I was seeing those rotations happen. It was both happening at right tackle and right guard. And I was thinking about how sometimes in college football, you'll see a coach rotate quarterbacks. And when that happens, you'll often hear the saying, if you have two quarterbacks, that means you don't have one quarterback, right? Because if you can't find the one, you just keep rotating the two. And that kind of is what the situation here is at right tackle and right guard for the Raiders. They don't really have one, so they're just continuing to rotate guys, play the hot hand like they would see at the running back position sometimes in a committee. I'm not so sure I like that philosophy. I'd like to see them let one guy try to settle in there, get comfortable, and earn the job. If he's playing horribly, okay, sit him down. But I'm not a big fan of this rotating at the offensive line position. I think it's a position that you need to get comfortable, get into the flow of the game, the speed of the game. So I'm hoping that maybe they'll move away from that philosophy.
And you know what? You have a veteran quarterback in Derek Carr. And I know he can roll with the punches. He's been through so much in his career with the Raiders. At the same time, though, I don't know if I would be as comfortable where I'm looking down and every other series I got different guys on my right side there. I'm just saying again, and I was telling people no excuses. And I'm not making excuses for them. I'm just saying it's not a good situation. And the Raiders, I think they'll address it. Listen, they've been through one game now. They've seen these guys are smart. They're going to go back. They're going to take a look at the film and say, okay, what do we do to get better now? And if that means bringing in another player, then I think they'll do it. Real quick, guys, before we take a quick break here, what's remarkable too, and I tweeted this out during the end of the game, which is if you look at the stats for this game, the team stats, you would have thought that this was a 1-point game. And it was a close game. Like you said, Murf, it's a one-score game. But if you look at what the Raiders did there, if it wasn't for the only number that sticks out is the turnovers. So you take away the turnovers in this game, and you could have had a much different result, right? And so I think that that's something that you have to look at as Raider fans. I know you're not happy right now, and I don't blame you because I know how Raider Nation gets when they don't win. But at the same time, as you said, Murph, I thought you said it perfectly. Not that far away. They got to just tweak some things here, get comfortable with it, and get ready.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at that first possession, right? And one of the things we saw McDaniels get so pissed off about in the preseason was when the Raiders didn't push it into the end zone when they're in the red zone. That was the first thing that we did on that first move. We kicked the field goal, and Daniel Carlson is lights out. And if there's one guy that sang the praises of the freaking special teams around here, it's me. Not in terms of the kicking game between Trent Sig, AJ Cole, and Daniel Carlson. I think those guys are studs, and so it's great to see that Carlson's clutch, but we don't want to see him be clutch. I want to see Derek throw it to freaking Mac Hollins in the red zone, right? Like the rest of us. And if that's the case, then you're right. It is a 1-point game to the exact number. So, and the Raiders would cover, by the way. Thanks, Raiders, for that. I didn't lose twice today. Shut up, BetMGM Sportsbook. But yeah, so it just, it was very, very close. And I got to think again that those are the kind of things that they're good. Like you just said it perfectly too. They're going to view the film. They're going to make changes. These guys are too freaking smart. Guess what, Raider Nation? They're smarter than we are because guess what? They've won Super Bowls and they do this for a living. You and I sell tires and drive Ubers. They know more than we do. So, let the football guys do the football stuff. Have faith. Root for the Raiders that are, not the Raiders that aren't. And I promise you, everything's going to be fine. They're going to get this thing figured out.
They will. I firmly believe that. All right, we're going to just take a real quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into some of more what we saw as well, some of the other concerns I have, including on defense and some other questions on the offense. You're listening to Silver and Black today. You're with Scott, you're with Murph, and you're with Evan. This is our post-game show. Raiders drop the first game of the season to the Chargers 24-19. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, here we are. We're back, Silver and Black today, our live post-game show. If you're joining us on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, wherever you are, Facebook, thanks for being with us. And I'm sorry the Raiders didn't win. Yes, Sunday night after the Raiders lose is not good for everybody, but there's always next week. It is only week 1, Raider Nation. Don't jump off it. You won't because you guys are Raider Nation for life, so I know you won't. But we're here to talk about the game. Scott Gulbransen, Murph from Raiders Fan Radio, and Evan from Just Pod Baby are here. And we talked about Derek Carr already, so we'll skip over that. I'll get to some YouTube questions here in a second. But guys, the defense on the other side of the ball, we talked about the defensive backs being a positive for the most part in the game, but the defensive line, Bilal Nichols had a nice play against the run early on. I thought that was very encouraging. But then we didn't see a lot of pass rush. Max Crosby did his thing a couple times, but they sort of neutralized him. Chandler Jones was on the side of a milk carton. Nobody knew where he was. Again, just one game. I'm not overcritical about it. I'm not overly worried about it. They did not get a push up front. Divine Diablo had a pretty good game overall as well. And Perryman as well, too, out there doing his thing. But Murf, that defensive front and the lack of ability to get some consistent pass rush on Justin Herbert didn't help.
No, not at all. And so, we stopped them on that 4th and 1, which was nice. And you mentioned Max, and I think if you had to pick anybody that's the MVP of that front seven, it would be him. He flashed quite a bit and showed why we paid him 98.98 this offseason. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty discouraging, man, that we figured, there was critics of Chandler Jones that said, well, he only had 10 sacks last season and 5 came against Taylor Lewan in week 1. You know what I mean? So if you look at the other 16 games that he played in, he only came up with 5 sacks, but I expected to just see him more on the ball. You know what I mean? And I think it was only like 1 or 2 plays where we saw 55 flash. And what was up with, and again, I'm not trust the football guys, but my fan brain and my fan eyes see number 99 rushing in off the corner. Didn't we decline his 5th-year option? And isn't he like one of the guys that we decided wasn't going to be part of this team and was like a big draft bust? Didn't we figure that out? And then now all of a sudden he's freaking standing up and rushing like he's gosh darn Ted Hendricks. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, so I don't understand that. And so I don't know, someone could maybe explain it to me, maybe a film guy. Where's Mo? Like, come on, Mo. Tell me why Farrell, Farrell, not Furl, why is he on the field? Kill him.
He's absolutely correct. In fact, I texted Scott during the game and I said, is it just me or is Cleveland Farrell playing a lot of snaps today? I was not expecting that. I agree with you, Murph. And I was hoping to see a little bit more Malcolm Kuntz. We did see from him a bit in the second half. But to kind of echo some of the thoughts that Scott was mentioning there, big disappointment for me has to be Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. They got paid a lot of money this offseason, and at least after one game, you didn't get that kind of impact you'd like to see from some of those high-paid guys. It was a marquee matchup. I was looking forward to seeing the combination of Jones and Crosby go up against Mack and Bosa. Clearly, Mack and Bosa were the better combo in this game. You hope to see Crosby and Chandler Jones make a bigger impact on future games here. But, yeah, it was disappointing to see them just do so little in this game.
And that's it. They were close, though. I mean, there were times when they would get in. It was just tough finishing it. And again, I think that goes back to getting, and I talked about it with Mo during the entire offseason, guys, which was getting that push up the middle, not just being good up the middle for the run, but being able to occupy the offensive line enough that you free up your edge guys. Because listen, you can push down and double down on Max or Chandler Jones on the other side if you're not getting a push in the middle. And guess what? You just neutralize them. And I thought I saw a little bit of that tonight. At times, the Raiders did make some push up the middle. Don't get me wrong, especially early in the game. But Murph, if you don't get that all the way, good play all the way across the line, then you're going to able to double team those guys and really cut down on their effectiveness.
Yeah, and as soon as you neutralize those guys, you neutralize that pass rush, then what happens? You get receivers running open downfield, and we see that, gosh, and if I hear another Herbert compliment, oh my gosh, it's just absolutely disgusting how sappy the freaking media is and the announcers and everybody about Justin Herbert. But anyways, you give him the ability to work outside the pocket and find receivers downfield. And this is in a game where Keelan Allen isn't even barely playing because he got hurt early on. So you can only cover for so long. You know what I mean? So I'm with you. It's like, I feel like we need to have a little more diversity in our pass rush. And they kind of ramped it up a little bit. We started blitzing a little bit and they started getting a little more active around the line of scrimmage. I love John Abram today. I'm going to ride that freaking, speaking of guys, we didn't pick up their 5th-year option. I'm riding my John Abram fandom until he's not wearing number 24 and in silver and black. I have faith that guy is still going to ball out for us. And because every game you see flashes. There was the one play where I forget who it was that he hit, almost knocked the ball. See, here's the thing though, almost, horseshoes and hand grenades. he allowed the first down, but he made a big hit and almost knocked the ball loose. And it was like almost like a huge electrifying play and just didn't come up with it. But anyways, like with that lack of a pass rush, we don't allow for those things to happen in the secondary. We don't allow for Deron Harmon. We don't allow for those guys to really work and do what they do to ball hawk and whatever else. So because we got to force throws, and we didn't force any throws today. We just let Justin Herbert kind of sit back there and do what everybody says he does so wonderfully.
Tell us how you really feel, Murf.
Why do we overhype the Chargers every single year? I don't understand it.
I'll tell you exactly why. You ready for this? And it's all about the 3 letters NFL. They're in Los Angeles. They're based in LA with the network. It's an LA market thing, even though most people, as you saw from all the pictures of the tailgate today at SoFi, and you heard the crowd when the Raiders did well, there's not very many Charger fans, but the NFL is invested in LA, and so they're investing their media, and everybody's hyping up the big media market guys. I really believe that's it. Now, listen, I do think he's a good quarterback, but again, you got to accomplish something to get my adulation, especially the media getting all this massive adulation over what he hasn't done yet and what he could possibly do. Well, if you could do that for everybody, we could talk about millions of guys who never made it and look good and had potential. So we'll see how that goes. Evan, we talked about Jonathan Abram in the past. Trayvon Moehrig, unfortunately, we heard was injured in this game as well, and he went out, as was DJ Turner, so we didn't see him as well. Some of the guys, the Raiders went into this game completely healthy, but we did not see him. Malcolm Kuntz was injured a little bit during practice last week, was listed as a full participant in the last day before the game, but we didn't see him either. When you look at that defense, to me, it really was a back and forth affair. Early in the game, I thought they looked really slow and a step behind, but I think that was, as many of you guys are commenting on, that was the system and just getting used to game speed. And then they kind of picked it up, and yeah, they had their moments where they might have dropped the ball a few times, but overall, that's to be expected, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys didn't play in the preseason. I don't want to make excuses for them, but yeah, I mean, I think they tightened things up a bit in the second half. They only gave out 24 points, and that's I mean, in the NFL against a top 5 offense from a year ago, that's not too bad. I'm going to continue to say this until it's not the issue. Today, the pass rush was not good enough. That defensive line and those edge rushers are the strength of this defense. And if they're not making impact plays, it's going to be very difficult for the back end players on the back end, especially when you got a couple guys getting banged up and leaving the game. So, I thought they did what they could do, but just clearly not enough today. You mentioned Jonathan Abram. I agree with Murf. I thought he played well today. He didn't really do anything that stood out, but he also didn't do anything that hurt the team drastically. And those are some of the things that we saw from him last year. If he can clean those types of plays up this year and just not be a liability out there, I think he can be a contributor on this defense. So he's off to a good start. I do agree with Murf.
All right, we talked about some of the players that shined and perhaps struggled a little bit this week in the loss to the Chargers. What about the coaching guys? So Josh McDaniels, the play calling, my opinion of it overall was very good. I thought they couldn't go to the run because of the offensive line issues and then down in distance a couple times and then score. But overall, I mean, there was some head scratchers where I'm like, why are you calling that play? Brandon Bolden was a lot more active than I thought he would be. And that was kind of interesting, especially in the passing game. But Murf, what did you think overall? Josh McDaniels, his first head coaching game in quite some time out there again, did so well in the preseason, I thought. What was your overall take on the coaching on the offense and the defense?
I'll offensively go back to the point about, I was surprised that they didn't keep with the run game more. When the running game was productive early on, they didn't stick with Jacobs. And I hope that's I'd like to think that there's not some crazy thing about like, well, we don't want him to play good or whatever. We want to reduce or limit his carries because we don't want to pay him or whatever. I don't buy into those kind of goofy fan theories. But it is surprising to me. And again, I mentioned earlier in the show, like when you're running the ball well, and then all of a sudden they do some like really weird trick play kind of thing. And, things are great when they work, and then when they don't, then it's easy to criticize them. So I'm not going to totally pile on, but I just thought that was a really odd timing for that. Like we had the ball moving downfield, like things were going good, and then all of a sudden it's 2nd and 20. It was like, whoa, what happened there? So that was interesting. So I would have liked to have seen more spread the ball around early on. Like you've got all this money invested into this offense. Let's use all these players. Let's use Renfro way before a 3rd and 6. Like, let's start going to him earlier. Like, let's move the ball around. So that was interesting. And then defensively, we're all big fans of Patrick Graham, and we're all big fans about the idea of like the versatile defense and like not playing a 4-3 or playing a whatever, and just playing the matchups. But then when you see Divine Diablo deep in coverage on cover 3 time after time and then get beat deep, I'm like, all right, like, it just, and I think that's like the Tampa 2 thing or whatever. Again, my exposure to play calling is Madden. So pardon me, those of you that are well educated on this stuff. Well, like when your middle linebackers dropping deep or your linebackers dropping way deep into coverage like that, it's some sort of like cover 2 with a deep drop linebacker or a cover 3, right? Because he's got the middle of the field. Well, he can't take on wide receivers. I'm sorry. Like that, I know that may be like, the scheme for the thing, but if you're playing matchups, well, then why do we have linebackers on wide receivers? Like, and so, because that allows for completions, right? So like, I thought that was a little bit curious. And then again, I just don't know if I don't want to base like one game's performance on a judgment of Graham, but we heard about all this idea about matchups and taking advantage, doing all this stuff. I didn't see a lot of moving around. Like, we didn't see a lot of like,
good point.
like the freaking Chargers were doing, where Mac's on one side and then he's on the other. And then like, even think back to like, when we had, oh my gosh, I'm pulling a brain fart. Who was our defensive coordinator?
Gus Bradley.
Gus Bradley. Thank you. We were stacking up guys where we had guys on the same side of the defensive line, like trying to take up right. We had Yannick Ngakoue and Max Scott, like they were lined up next to each other. He would put Farrell inside and like have them stack up to take on blockers and like those kind of creative things. And I know no one was a fan of Gus Bradley's cover 3, but point being though, is that I need to go back and watch the game, but it seemed like it was a little bit overhyped, that idea of like, we're going to do all this crazy stuff and take advantage of all these matchups. And it just didn't seem like we did.
Yeah. Evan, what do you think of that? I noticed it too, because that was one of the deals that we heard, is that his defense can be complex because he moves it around and you have to get used to it. A little bit easier to digest in many ways than Gus Bradley's or, God forbid, Paul Gunther's defense. But I was shocked by that too. I didn't see them. I didn't see them move. We knew the Chargers were weak on the right side of their offensive line with Pipkin over there. And I didn't see them really attack him except for a couple times. And it actually worked those couple times. Did you notice it as well?
Yeah, I agree with you guys. We've heard all about his creativity and Murf said it perfectly. It seemed a little vanilla to me today. I was expecting a little bit more from him. I hopped on Raiders Twitter during the game. I heard a lot of people complaining about the lack of blitzing and too much zone coverage, and wanted to see more press man coverage. I'm not an X's and O's guy. I have to go back and watch it a second time to really get a better idea of that kind of thing. But those of you who are expecting to see a ton of blitzes out of Patrick Graham, he's not going to blitz a whole lot. I believe Evan
remix.
The beauty of live video. That was weird. So we'll get Murph's dancing.
That was a good one, man.
Evan, you sounded like we were at a house party with some EDC music, and you were repeating over and over again, and I was having flashbacks to some maybe illicit materials I took in college. So we'll get Evan back here in a second. But Murph, that was interesting. And on the offensive side too, and you make an important point, which is, look, it's one game, folks. Okay, so you got to figure these guys will get different and will get better, and will kind of get used to their personnel, because coaches see the personnel in preseason, they see it during camp and all of that. But at the same time, it's different when you get that real action. And the play you were talking about was the wide receiver pass option reverse that they threw. And I forgot who it was, but somebody on Twitter said something to the effect of, I know it was my good friend Kelly Kreiner, who said, your offensive line is getting destroyed, and you decide to run a slow-moving, developing play behind that offensive line. Now, I love the creativity on the offense, especially with an athlete the quality of Davante Adams. Like, I would love to see that play eventually, but at that point, it was really questionable. But I think they were just trying to light a spark under that team.
I think so too, and that's a great point. Like, yeah, I'm not opposed to those kind of trickeration plays and all that kind of stuff. We see them in the NFL all the time. But like, when do we see them? We see the Philly special in the Super Bowl when no one's expecting it, right? You see the, you know what I mean, or the surprise onside kick, you know, Sean Payton style, whatever. Like, you see those kind of things that just come out of nowhere. You don't expect to see it when you're struggling already in protection, and then And again, I don't know if it was a design flaw. I don't know if something got broken up there. But when you got a Derek Carr and a one-on-one with Bosa,
oh my gosh,
it's not going to go well. Like, what are we doing there? Like, hey, you want to play matchups? Yeah, not that one.
Not that one.
You know what I mean?
And it was funny because the announcers on television was Trent Green and I think Ian Eagle. And they said, yeah, Carr had the block on it. He just barely made contact with him. And then Trent Green says, actually, not really made contact with him. And who would blame him? You don't want your starting quarterback taking on Joey Bosa. I mean, there was confusion. But again, so when people were talking about, for example, Carr's performance tonight, and they were talking about system, that's an example of the system and the play just kind of blowing up because they hadn't done it in live action before. Real live action. And so you're like, okay, it happened, oh, well, it looks good. Eventually they'll get it down and they'll have the right cadence to make it work perhaps. But at the same time, it's only one game. And I think that's the key. But overall, for me, I was happy. The defense stuck out to me more than what I saw on offense. And a lot of people were asking, well, why did he target Adams so much? Why didn't they call more plays to Renfro? Why didn't they call... Listen, Derek has the option to go where he sees fit during those plays. It's not like they say, okay, you have to go to this receiver. That might be the initial receiver, but if he sees Davante Adams in the open field, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the best wide receiver in football. All due respect to Hunter Renfrow, who we all think is stellar, but at the same time, I think you're looking at it differently, and he is going to target. And yeah, he's got to spread it around a little more, and I think he will. But I think overall, Murph, that showed a little bit that Carr just wasn't that comfortable today. He just wasn't.
Yeah, and let me ask you, Scott. So, is that a result of lack of play in the pre? I mean, we saw a lot of sloppy football today. I mean, especially if you watch the morning games, I mean, there was a lot of goofiness going on out there. The Bengals got trashed by the Steelers, and talk about at the offensive line, but so many turnovers and just sloppy football today. And a lot of the common theme, and I watched the Red Zone channel for the earlier games before we get to the Raiders, and kind of the common theme from all these different games were that, this is what happens when you don't play in the preseason. But then at the same time, and here's where I ask you this question, same time, but that's why coaches now have all these joint practices, because effectively you have the preseason game, but you're in a controlled environment where they're thumping each other. It's not full contact, so you don't have to risk, Derek Carr getting hurt or whatever else. So do you think is that what we saw today? Was it just a lack of comfortability because they just haven't been playing in live fire?
I think it is a little bit. I mean, listen, I'm not advocating for them to play in preseason games. In fact, I was bummed that the collective bargaining agreement didn't get rid of him. I knew they wouldn't get rid of him, obviously, because of the money to the owners, because after all, that's what the NFL wants is the money. And so I get it, but at the same time, it's just a slippery slope. I see the positives of saying, hey, if Derek Carr just played a couple series, the last two preseason games, one series, another series, but do I really think that would make a difference? No, but I agree with you. I think that overall in the NFL, we see teams hit week one not as well prepared for full live action as we did before the money got so big that they had to stop doing that and hold these guys back. Because when you start investing the kind of money you have in Derek Carr, Davante Adams, and Max Crosby, you don't want them out there, because if he blows out a knee in the first preseason game, guess what? It can change the whole scope of your season. Now, yes, that could still happen in week one, but I do think you see that as sloppiness, because an NFL game, a regular season game, the timing, the speed in which the play goes, the force in which the guys hit, it's just on a different level than it is in the preseason. And so everybody takes time to acclimate. Some teams seem to adapt more quickly, but the Raiders, 2 new systems, offense, defense, new coach, new players, all that stuff, I don't think it benefited them not to be able to at least get some play, but I wouldn't advocate for them to do it again.
Yeah, and so in the chat there, it's Adamisis, I believe is the name. He says Herbert played 0 snaps in the preseason too. Well, and I think that's a fair point, but Herbert's playing in a system that he's familiar with already, that's already established with Staley, and is already, and I think the Chargers are one of the few teams in the NFL. Like, I mean, they're returning so many people from prior year. You look at this Raider team. I mean, it's a revamp, and it's not a rebuild. It's more of a reboot, I would say. But I think that's he makes a fair point. But I think Scott makes a great point, and is that it's all new for the Raiders. It's new for Derek Carr. It's new verbiage. It's new. One of our good friends that joins us on our show is we call him QB Jeff. He's he's the all-time passing leader at Alameda High School. Played at Laney College in Oakland, and played for the MTSU Blue Raiders and whatnot. Anyway, so he talks about that, the complexity of these offenses and the idea that Derek Carr has to pick up all this new verbiage all the time. It's a pain in the ass. Like, it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy overcomable thing. So when you have a guy like Herbert, who is already in the system from a prior year, it's an advantage. So I don't think that that's an apples to apples. I appreciate the comment in the chat, but I don't know if that's apples to apples. I think Scott's more dead on with that idea that, like, it's not only the lack of reps, it's a lack of reps in this new thing.
Yeah, and there's some people in the chat saying, oh, no more excuses. And actually, I'm one who agrees with no excuses. I don't think that is an excuse. I think, to your point, and you said it, there's an advantage, okay? You're not excusing it. You're saying there's just an advantage, okay? And that is something that I believe to be real. I also want to shout out our good friend, Just Win Wendy, who said, I don't agree with most of the comments above because we're getting a bunch of folks who are obviously upset, mostly because it's the first effing game, people. And Tay had 141 yards. Because a lot of people are saying it's not working. And I agree. You cannot go. I'm sorry, folks. Look, I know there were some performances that you like to forget, but you cannot say it's not working after one game. I mean, let's go. You have to. In fact, and I've heard it on your show too, Murf. By the way, go subscribe to Murf's Raiders Fan Radio on YouTube. And that is, look, you're going to have a feeling out period. It's going to take a few weeks. Every new head coach, it's why if you look at the record of a new head coach in the NFL in the first season, especially the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. Now, they struggle a little bit. Now, is there examples of new coaches that go 3-0? I mean, look what happened with McDaniel and with the Dolphins today, playing a really bad Patriots team, by the way. The offense, I know Raider fans will love that. But I think it does take time. And so if after 3 weeks they look like this, okay, then I could say you could ramp up your concern a little more. But I said it, and Mo said it over the summer and everything, that, look, when they get to the regular season, and this is why we talk so much about the schedule, it's going to be tough. And so their feeling out period, they have a little bit of a tough schedule. So if they can come out of that schedule above 500 or around 500, they should be okay. And I still believe that. So make sure you look at your sample size. I just can't believe people already saying it's not working when you're talking about one game.
Yeah, I agree. And shout out Wendy there in the chat. Got to watch the game there. And was it when I joined you last time? It was the last preseason game, and saw Wendy there at the game. And so it was good to see her. Yeah, man, I'm with you. So if so we got the Cardinals coming up. So we got a first home game, right? And then we're going to go on the road at Tennessee Titans. And so that's going to be like, so if after that sample size, I'm with you. And if that point, it's still a problem, then it's a problem, because those are winnable games, right? We saw the Titans lose today. I mentioned the Cardinals got absolutely destroyed earlier today. So the next two games are very winnable games. So if we show up in those two games like we showed up today against the Chargers, who are our arch rival, we're playing an effective home game, it's indoors, the whole 9 yards. If then we turn into, then I'm with you, Raider Nation. Then we can just say the Raiders have relieved us of expectation and the burden of it for the rest of the season, and it's all over, and we'll just look forward to the food and hanging out with our friends and family on Sundays. But until then, I'm gonna have faith, man, that we're gonna get this thing together, because I'm with you, Scott. There's so much, and people call me a bootlicker, and they say, oh, you're just a freaking optimist, and you're this, and you're an apologist, and all that. There's nothing wrong with having faith, because without faith, without hope, there's nothing left but despair. I'm not going to go into the next 16 games in despair. So until this thing is freaking really over, I'm going to trust in it. I'm going to be a fan of the Raiders, and I'm going to trust that they're going to get this thing figured out, because what else are you going to do? Right. Just turn off the TV then. Watch Star Wars instead. I don't know.
And with that, with all due respect to the folks in the chat, man, I wouldn't be so negative so fast. I'm not saying be happy with what happened today. Nobody's happy with the Raiders' loss. But from my perspective, covering it objectively, yeah, there were some things that I would be concerned about and I'll write about in my column up on SportsNot this week, but it's not going to be the sky is falling. But I think Raider Nation, Murph, is so preconditioned to the wheels falling off every year that even in week one, they're just like, okay, I'm not Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football anymore. I'm not going to be fooled into saying, okay, here I go, I'm going to kick the football, and they pull it out from under me. But again, give it a few weeks, okay? I'm not saying you're going to be happy if they start 0-2 or if they start 1-2 or 3-2, whatever it may be, but you got to give it some time. And to your point, you do this so well, which is, what other choice? You can be negative, you can be positive, or you could actually kind of just be, how about carefully optimistic? Say, you know what, I'm concerned with the offensive line, but I did see these things that are good. And that's what we try to do on the postgame show, is kind of give a balanced look at it before we get into some hardcore analysis of the game when we rewatch it on Tuesday. But that's it, Murph. I mean, it's got to be something where people just say, look, this is going to be a work in progress. You're coming off a tumultuous year where everything changed, and change is hard sometimes. They have better talent. We know that. It just needs to perform on the field.
Yeah, and I've been around the sun enough times to have seen this team go 2-14 and seen some really, really awful things, and Tom Walsh and his bed and breakfast offense and all these other garbage things that have happened with it. But listen, Raider Nation, the days of Al Davis and a projector and Lane Kiffin are long over. So like those things, like let's not be a victim to the previous versions of the Raiders. Let's let this version of the Raiders inform itself. Let's not let those past versions of it inform our present. And I say that because, look, I know we lost today, and I know we lost to a division rival, and I know it sucks, but like, let's not let that dictate our expectation, because there are too many quality people now running this organization. And not that Al Davis wasn't quality, but look at it, in the latter days of Al Davis, it was questionable some of the things that went on around the organization. It was questionable some of the things that went on, not too far after his passing and whatnot. Mm-hmm. There has been a lot of questionable eras in terms of leadership and the way that the function of the organization, the health of the organization. Now we are like at the top of that list. The Raiders are one of the most wealthiest teams in the NFL. We've got an amazing new president, which I was glad to see them highlight today, and Sandra Douglas Morgan. Like, we've got a legit GM. We've got a legit head coach. We've got, so many great things going on with our front office, that those things eventually will take root in the performance on the field. It didn't happen in the way we all wanted it to happen in week one, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Like, let's let this thing freaking play out. And honestly, Scott, and I'll throw this out there. Look, I know Raider Nation is like, well, when's it going to be our turn? When are we going to win? When is, like, and enough people that are younger than I am will listen to our show, and they'll be like, well, that's great, Murph, that you had those days in the 70s and the 80s and all that stuff. But when is it going to be our turn to be? Well, look, it may not be this year, but I promise you this. For someone that's viewed this team as a fan for all these freaking years, and if you could just go back and look through the history of this team, we are setting ourselves up for incredible success for a long term. Like, this thing is not all about right now. We didn't get Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski to win a Super Bowl this year and then cash out. We're building something for the future here. That's why they signed all these guys, the core players of this offense and on our defense. We've signed these guys to these long-term. This is going to be like a 5-year run here. Right. And unless some, Ziegler and McDaniels fire off some illicit emails, we're going to be in this thing for a minute. So let's just hang in there, have faith in this thing, and watch it play out. And I think we're going to be okay.
See, that's why we have you on, Murph. You're a fan who's as passionate as anybody else in Raider Nation, but you balance out your feelings. And I'm sure there's times when you're some of that stuff there in the fan cave is being thrown around the room, but you're able to calm yourself and talk about it logically, because you're right. You can wake up every day and be negative, or you can wake up and be positive. And hopefully Raider fans will have more to be positive about this year than before. Also, I want to note too, real quick, as we wrap up the show tonight, which is the Chargers. Listen, everybody needs a division game, right? The AFC West is going to be a knockdown, drag out. But the Chargers had to win this game today. We talked about it this week. They have to go to Kansas City on a short week in Arrowhead, which I don't think they have any chance of winning. So they would have started 0-2 in the division as well, and I think they had to have it. And so it showed a little bit. I thought they had a little bit more juice than the Raiders did too, as well as just kind of energy, especially at key moments. but that'll change too. It's just, it's different playing at home and playing on the road, especially when you're at home and it's all full of Raider fans. You kind of have to overcome that a little bit, but it'll be interesting. But all I know is that listen to Murf. You can complain all you want, and I'm seeing a lot of seeing a lot of Derek Carr stuff on the chat, of course, and that'll take care of itself. I really believe that, and we'll see a better player in week 2. Murf, I want to thank you again, man, for joining us. Let everybody know where to find you and what you got going, because I know you're doing some great charity work with the One Foundation, correct?
Yeah, the One Nation Foundation.
One Nation,
yeah, appreciate
thank you.
that.
I forgot the word.
Yeah, so that's cool. So when we figured out we could make money with our podcast, Raiders Fan Radio, we decided to start our own nonprofit. We call it the One Nation Foundation, and 100% of the money that we raise, we give it to Raiders-related charities like the Bolitnikoff Foundation. Right now, we're on track to write the Bolitnikoffs a check for $8,000 for their foundation at the end of the year to the at their annual Crab Fest. And so and 100% of that money comes from direct donations to our show, merchandise sales, any advertising opportunities that we get. And so we just say that, we appreciate all the donations, but even if you can't donate, just support the show. Just like you do here for Silver and Black today. Hit the thumbs up, hit the like, hit the subscribe, tweet it, tell all your friends, because any of the advertising opportunities that we get, we put that money directly into the foundation as well. And again, we're supporting all Raiders related charities. We've supported the Stabler XO Foundation. We supported Allison King, Kenny King's mom, when she was fighting through her cancer battle. There's been a handful of numerous charities, but again, the Bolitnikoff is kind of like our main target every year. And so, yes, we appreciate you. So if you could just help us do that, just coming up here on the 21st, if I could just shout one thing out, on the 21st, we're doing a giveaway of a signed, well, here, I'll just show you. The good folks at Woodson Whiskey. Shout out Woodson Whiskey.
Nice.
Autographed Hall of Fame football here from Charles Woodson. Wow. And we're going to be auctioning this thing off, really a raffle on our show on the 21st. So check out youtube.com/Raiders Fan Radio. We're giving that thing away. And then that Sunday before the game, if any of you are coming to Tennessee to watch the Raiders take on the Titans, we're doing a joint tailgate with the Bussin' with the Boys guys. And that's going to be at Acme Feed and Seed starting at 10 a.m. Before the game. And you can hang out with us and drink till 11:45, walk across the bridge and be in your seats before kickoff.
You got to like that. That sounds like a blast. And not only that, again, Murf and the team do so much to help out in the Raider Nation community, and it's remarkable. So, man, we appreciate that, and I'm glad we could give you some more time. But go over there, subscribe, and you'll get all the information. Murf will send me the links. I'll post it in our video as well, so you guys can get there. Murf, we'll talk to you next week, my man.
All right, you're awesome, Scott. Thank you so very, very much. Go Raiders.
All right, there you go. There is Murf from Raiders Fan Radio. As always, we have him on the postgame show. Great time, and I love getting the voice of the fan out there. And thank you guys all for being on the chat too in YouTube as usual. Good stuff in there. I don't always agree with you. You don't always agree with me, and that's cool. That's what we're here to do, and we love you subscribing to the podcast. So please do that for us. We are on every Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday postgame. So Tuesday, Thursday, we dropped a special episode on the Waller contract. If you haven't downloaded that or listened to it yet from Saturday, check it out with some comments from Mo and I. Mo will be back on Tuesday. He was full of assignments today, so couldn't make the post-game show, but he's back every week, and he is my co-host. So please join us there, as always, on the Odyssey Original Podcast Network. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and we thank you so much for your support. For Evan Groat, we want to thank him for being with us as well. You can check him out on the Just Pod Baby podcast. And for Murf from Raiders Fan Radio, I am Scott Gulbransen. Thanks